afternoon. Next, we'd like to welcome Bill Stilley, CEO of Adial Pharmaceuticals, to the ICR Westwood Conference. Bill has served as Adial's CEO since co-founding the company in December 2010. Adial is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on the development of treatments for addictions. The company's lead investigational new drug product, AD04, is currently in phase 3 development as a genetically targeted therapeutic agent for the treatment of alcohol use disorder. Bill, thanks for joining us. I'll now turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate being here today, and thank you for everyone that's joined us to listen to the presentation. So first of all, I get a nice introduction there, but a little bit more about my background so you know to whom speaking to you. After undergrad, Marine Corps Business School, I went into entrepreneurship and focused on finance, and along the way got recruited to be the CFO of a biotech. And that's a little closer to 20 years ago than I like to think sometimes, but have been involved in the development of drugs through all the various stages from bench chemistry up to launch. And my last position was working for a company that acquired my previous company, and I was looking for assets to acquire and found the technology for Adial. I liked it, brought it in. It was a meaningful product, and as it was moving towards acquisition, the company, which is called Clinical Data, a public company, mid-cap, decided to sell itself, and we ended up transacting with Forrest as a $1 billion+ deal. But because of that, I was able to then get the technology and co-found Adial Pharmaceuticals. And we're really talking about something here that was so meaningful to me that I felt like I had to do it, which is going after addiction. It's really an underserved market and a massive market. It's a big problem. I'll go right into it now, and of course, you've seen these slides before, and talk about Adial. So we are focused on developing treatments for addiction, medicinal treatments for addiction. Our lead product is a genetically targeted drug for alcohol use disorder. So when I say genetically targeted, what I mean is you have the right genetics, you get a test. If you're positive, then the drug would be expected to help you. If not, then you would not get the test. And it's targeted after alcohol use disorder. Now, this is one of the largest disease states that exist in the world and in the United States. And, the Lancet has even said that it's the leading cause of death in people in their prime, which is ages 15 to 49. I mentioned the genetic targeting, so that'd be about 30% or a little over about a third of the population. The drug helps people reduce their craving for alcohol to reduce or eliminate their drinking. We had good success in a phase 2 trial. We are currently running a phase 3 trial in 7 countries. The cost of manufacturing is extremely low. Our commercialization strategy would be to go after the addiction specialist, which you could do with a niche sales force. But eventually, you're going to want to get to the larger market, and we think we'd either need to partner or be acquired by a larger pharmaceutical company in order to get the best success out of this drug. Long, strong IP out to 2032. We expect extensions out to 2037, and we currently have capitalization to get what we need to do this year. A little bit more about the team. I talked about myself, Dr. Johnson, one of the world's luminaries in the field of addiction. Joe Trulick, the CFO, has been with me for multiple companies now. We work great together. Alex Lugovoy was head of business development for Indivior, which developed Suboxone. Mark Pekin, our chief strategy officer, and Skylar Vincent add in a ton of experience for the rest of the team. Board of directors also extremely experienced. Kevin Schuyler runs a $10 billion CIO operation. Tony Goodman was the chief business officer of Indivior that built the drug Suboxone into a $1.6 billion opioid use disorder drug, and then other people with a lot of experience in key positions. I mentioned earlier that alcohol use disorder is one of the largest disease states in the world. And just to give a little more color to that, approximately 35 million people have been estimated to have alcohol use disorder in the United States. The cost to society is enormous. More than 1 in 20 cancers caused by alcohol, according to the American Oncology Association. $250 billion of damage done to the U.S. economy. And then the rest of the world, of course, much more. And what's even worse is today the problem is skyrocketing, exploding. Just recently, the United Kingdom came out and said their analysis is, the National Health Service came out and said that the people drinking at alcoholic levels has increased by 75% since COVID started. So people are at home. The United States, people aren't going to bars anymore, but the amount of alcohol being consumed is going up. Think about what that means. So this is a massive problem that is getting worse. And Commercially, it's good for Adial, but it is not something I would have ever wished on the world. If you think about that, of the people being treated, a small number are actually getting treated today. And so you have a lot of people that are not getting treated, but still it's 2.7 million people each year are getting some sort of form of treatment. In Europe, you have an even bigger problem. So a massive market worldwide. And you might ask yourself, if you have such a big problem, why are so few people getting treated? And I would tell you it's because today all the treatments available can only be characterized by one word, and that word is extreme. If you think about it, first-line therapy is raise your hand, dramatic life makeover. Usually you have to give up friends, sometimes have to dissociate from your own family. This is not something people take lightly, and the majority of people that have the problem, as I showed earlier, are not willing to attempt the treatment. If you are willing then to go to one of the pharmacologic treatments out there today, again, extreme. Antabuse has been around for years. It's a drug that if you take it and then drink, you get violently ill. It can even be fatal. The market leader is Vivitrol. It is a 30-day injection, 18-gauge needle, and has side effects. So you have to go in every 30 days, get this injection, and then you have to put up the side effects, particularly GI side effects. So people that are willing to do this have really crossed the Rubicon, saying that their life is so bad that they need this kind of help. And AA will even tell you, they say, you likely will not be willing to take the treatments available today unless you've hit, and they have a term for it. It's called rock bottom. It means your life has been destroyed in some way. So we think there should be a better alternative. We think we're moving forward that way. And what the people want is they want to have their life not being negatively affected by alcohol. What they don't want are the extreme treatments today. So what we have, new method of action through 5-HT3 blockade. Apparently, so far it's demonstrated a good safety and tolerability profile. Oral dosing, we think that is important. Reduces the, it reduces the craving for alcohol to reduce the drinking. And we think that can also help you eliminate the drinking. So this would fit right in with the AA paradigm. Again, you don't have to if you don't want. Make the public announcement, so it lowers that stigma. And then the genetic test. We think the genetic test can not only help in the people that are genetically positive, of course, being able to identify those people is important, but this can also help drive uptake in the market. And if you think about it, the conversation today between a doctor and a person that they think might have a problem is, hey, I noticed, you recorded your drinking a fair amount. You fill out that thing every time you go into the doctor. They might see some analytics and blood work that maybe gives them some indications there might be a problem. And they say, hey, I noticed you're drinking a bit. Have you ever thought about getting help? Maybe going to AA, going, for one of these treatments, try Vivitrol. And the answer is, whoa, wait a minute. That's pretty extreme. That's not for me. That's for those other people. And so now, though, the conversation can be, hey, I notice you're having a problem. I have a test to indicate whether a drug could help you reduce your drinking. What do you think about taking the test? Instead of that other answer, when we do some of our interviews and all that we've done with market research, instead of getting, whoa, that's not for me, you get, wow, that'd be really interesting to know. Maybe that could be something that could help. So to put a little finer point on this, let's talk about a few drugs that have done this. I mentioned that lowers the stigma, doesn't make you go into public and announce yourself. So you have another drug that had been out called Methadone. You had to go into the public setting, get that drug. However, and by the way, that was a good opioid that, what they call a good opioid to replace heroin and some of the bad opioids. That drug had been out for a while. Not that many people used it. A fair number, but not that many people. It wasn't a massive market. Suboxone comes out. And the main difference with Suboxone is that you could take it in the confidence of your doctor and self-medicate at home. And with that, of course, what you see in the chart here is you had an explosion, $1.6 billion, a drug that really did well, $1.6 billion in revenue. You think about maybe another drug where there had been a number of treatments out there, and everybody said, well, smokers, they have Nicorette, they have these various things, the patch, but they don't really want to stop. There's social reasons. There's all these. So a drug for smokers isn't going to be that big. But when you had a safe, easy to use pill that comes out, of course, we know what happened with Chantix. And then finally, let's think about that willingness to step forward and admit you have a problem. There's a drug that handled an indication. It was an embarrassing indication, kind of like some people would consider an alcohol problem. And there weren't any good treatments that weren't extreme. And so you have these extreme treatments, and people say, I can handle it. It's not that bad. I don't have a problem. Then when a simple, safe, easy-to-use pill came out, you had a massive number of people step forward to get treatment. And what I'm talking about here is ED. So you had an embarrassing disorder with no good solutions. I mean, if you think about it, back at the time, an implant or an injection that you did at the time were your options. And so you end up, when you have a safe, easy-to-use pill, not that I'm saying that, alcohol is going to sell as well as sex does, but the question is, will people step up for a treatment once they realize that there's a good solution? So you do compare to the rest of the products out there. These are the important characteristics we think to get people to try the drug, and there are definitely some liabilities with the current treatments available. What we have is a serotonin 3 blocker. It's a competitive antagonist to block serotonin 3, which is well known to work upstream of dopamine. It's also known that alcohol drives serotonin. So what we have demonstrated in phase 2 is that this hypothesis that was had going into the phase 2 is that it works. And I'll say that a little bit more about the drug. The drug is called ondansetron. Ondansetron, as I said, is a 5-HT3 blocker. It is currently approved under the brand name Zofran. Zofran is marketed at a 4 milligram dose at the lowest. At the highest it's been on the market is a 32 milligram, currently a 16. And that's as an infusion, which means that it's been dosed at almost 100 in the market at 100 times our dose, which is a 0.33 milligram tablet. So we think we have an incredible safety, we'll say advantage there with that this drug has been on the market at such high doses. And the first question that I asked when I looked at this is, well, if Zofran's already out there, why won't people just use Zofran instead of taking your drug? And the reason is twofold. First is, in dose ranging work that's been done, the effect seems to go away once you start overdosing. By the way, this is not unusual in brain drugs, where the sensitivity is much greater in the brain than it is in the periphery or the rest of the body. And in particular, serotonin drugs. 90% of your serotonin is in your gut. Some of it's in the rest of the periphery and a very small amount in the brain. And so if you think about ADHD medications, antidepressants, the dosing has to be right. If you dose too low, it doesn't work. If you dose too high, it doesn't work. And there's one people may have heard of called marijuana. If you dose low doses, it can actually be anxiolytic, help with anxiety. If you dose high doses, it can be pro-anxiolytic. So our drug seems to work similarly to other serotonin modulators and other brain effective drugs. And so if you dose with the high current doses of Zofran, it wouldn't be expected to work. The second thing is the highest doses of Zofran have been shown to have cardiovascular side effects. And in the acute setting, the high Zofran doses are tolerable. So currently, the infused product is usually used for a few hours after an operation, post-operatively. And the lower doses of the Zofran are used for a few days post-chemotherapy and post some other in the acute setting. So a few hours, few days. And the cardiovascular risks in that setting are tolerable. But for an addiction, which would be for years, maybe even a lifetime, there would be safety concerns. So we don't think people will use Zofran off-label, one, because it would not be expected to work at those doses, and cutting the tablet up into 12 parts is not feasible, and two, because there would be potential safety concerns. The second question that comes up when you have a drug that's already in the market is what's going to prevent the generics from coming on as soon as you get an approval? And that's where our patents come into play. So our patents are the use of ondansetron in patients with these genotypes for alcohol use disorder. The trial design we've worked out with the FDA is the use of ondansetron in patients with these genotypes for alcohol use disorder. And our patents are the use of ondansetron in patients with these genotypes for alcohol use disorder. What that means is if somebody comes out with the 0.33 milligram tablet, they have to do it under an approved label. The only label out there will be ours, and they will be in violation of our patents. By the way, the doses, the patents are not dose specific. So if they went and they ran a trial at a 0.4 milligram tablet and got effect also, they would still be in violation of our patents if they came out with that. So we feel very confident. I had that evaluated before I ever got involved in the company and even before the patents had issued. So those were the pending patents. So that's a very powerful position for us, and we expect to have patent protection, as I said earlier, till 2037. Now, let's get into the results. Get me excited now and why we are going to phase 3. We ran a phase 2 trial in 283 patients. I show you a couple slides here. The dark blue bars show those patients that were of the genetic, positive genetically, and the other bars show you those that were not positive genetically. And there's a drug and a placebo group in each. The primary endpoint was reduction of severity of drinking, measured in drinks per drinking day. So how much they drank when they drank. The secondary endpoint was frequency of drinking, measured in days of abstinence. So you want to increase the days of abstinence, which means a reduction in the frequency of drinking. And what you see here is in both the primary and secondary endpoints, you had a significant effect so that the patients drank less often, and when they drank less. And to put a little finer point on that, if you look at baseline, which is at the bottom, this is an almost 50% reduction in the frequency of drinking and an almost 60% reduction in the quantity of drinking when they drank. So they picked up the bottle less often, and when they picked it up, they could put it back down. Now, talk about moving towards approval. The FDA and the EMA have both agreed that an approval endpoint can be based on what they call a heavy drinking day. Heavy drinking day is defined as 5 or more drinks in a day for a man, 4 or more drinks in a day for a woman. And the data are compelling that all damage due to alcohol is due to these days. And if you kind of put a little finer point on that, think about if you have 2 patients. Patient A drinks every day of the year, and they drink 2 drinks a day. So that's over 700 drinks a year. It's a it's a fair amount of alcohol, quite a bit. Then you have person B, who drinks half as much as person A. Okay, so first of all, I ask you, does person A have a problem with alcohol if they're drinking 2 drinks a day? And I'd say most people would say, yeah, they probably don't. They're able to control themselves. They're not having, what I'll call the drunk effects. And they're also not getting their blood levels to a point that they're creating massive, physical damage to their body. They're not getting it up, taking the tissue to cause the cancers. They're not destroying their GI tract. So then, as I said, you have person B. Person B drinks half as much as person A. But they drink it all in, let's say, 10 or 20 days a year. So they're binge drinking. That means they're drinking 10 or 20 drinks every time they go out drinking. And you ask the question, does person B have a problem with alcohol? They drink half as much. And the answer clearly is yes, they have a problem. They're doing all the drunk, what we call drunk stupid things, having all the effects on their life, missing work, all that type of thing. But not only that, they're getting blood levels so high that they are destroying their body. They're causing all these physical and medical problems that come with alcohol addiction. And so the heavy drinking day is what both the EMA and the FDA have agreed is the basis for approval. So when you look at the phase 2, those were not the endpoints. And because each day becomes binary, either it's a good day or a bad day, and that means for a male, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4 drinks, you shouldn't get behind the wheel after 4 drinks. But for the most part, those days aren't going to be causing a lot of problem in your life. Or if you do 6 drinks, of course, is better than 20, but right around that threshold is when things start to get bad. If you can reduce those days, you can have a material effect on their life. And now this trial was not powered for that endpoint, with that binary day. However, the effect was so robust that when you analyze the data under that endpoint, we even achieved significance there. So we are now going into phase 3 with about 3 times the number of patients in the genetic positive group, and expect to be able to show an effect. And so the FDA has already agreed that we can exclude the non-genetically positive patients, which really reduce the time and cost of the trial, and go into a trial as a pivotal. Our plan is to run a phase 3 trial, which we are doing now, targeted against reducing the mean number of heavy drinking days. If we are successful with that, we would go into one that also tries to show that we can reduce the number of patients that have any heavy drinking days. If we can be successful in these trials, we expect to get an approval in both the Europe and US. I would say with COVID doing what it's doing, we've announced that we are working with the FDA to see if there are ways to expedite this program, and I believe we have a solid rationale for that, but we're in discussions at the moment. Once we get to market, as I mentioned before, the high prescribers will be the psychiatrists and addiction specialists. They're fairly easily targeted, and I think we can get to a few hundred million, maybe even a multi-billion-dollar product just with that group. And then eventually, maybe after a year or so, you're going to want to go to the mass market and see if you can really turn this into a multi-billion-dollar product. And to put a finer point on that, if you take a $255 a month cost of the drug and you look at only the patients that are genetically positive, so we've cut the market by a third already, it's still a $35 billion market if you take all those patients and you look at that type of thing. So if you look at that smaller group there, that's an almost $3 billion market. So it's 2.7 million people. You take a third of them, you go with the $255 a month price, it's about a $3 billion market. So if you can get a small percentage, a very tiny percentage of the bigger market, yes, you could have a multi-billion-dollar drug. But what's also important is the low-hanging fruit. With a $3 billion market there of patients that have already decided they need treatment, if you can show that they're genetically positive, you would expect a significant number of them to step forward. And that's why I think with a small sales force, you can get to multi-hundred million, maybe even low billion-dollar product. On the kind of nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling, this is a drug that has already been manufactured. We have already manufactured the 0.33 milligram tablet at commercial scale. We recently had another manufacturing. The stability looks good. We've had strong stability out to 5 years so far. So we think we're going to get a long shelf life, and we think we can produce this very inexpensively. Wrapping up, large market, late stage drug in phase 3, companion diagnostic. We have figured out with the FDA how to get there. Big margins once you do, long, strong patents. And then finally, talking a little bit more about the company and where we can go. So we are working now to do some exploratory work for ADO4 for opioids. We've already announced that we were doing that. And then recently we announced the acquisition of Pernivate. Pernivate is a company focused on adenosine receptor technologies, and we have a terrific and I'm just so excited about what's going on there. Programs for non-opioid pain and a more early stage program for cocaine addiction. Also say with the team we got there with Dr. Robert Thompson, you can look him up. He's done a ton in the adenosine space. We have one of the world's best adenosine libraries, which allow us a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed once we get that acquired. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Bill. We have a couple of questions. The first one is, what are some of the key upcoming milestones that you believe will drive value for shareholders?
Well, so first of all, one of the most important things, so thank you, Natalia. One of the most important things happening, of course, is our phase 3 trial. And with COVID, being able to keep that trial running, be able to keep it, on track and get to that data is extremely important. So to me, some of the more important things are that we are able to, continue recruiting. We recently announced that we had hit 35% recruited at this point, or enrolled, I should say. And, at this point, we're up over 40%, and we're moving on track to that, and we expect to have data this year. Other things are we now have a pipeline that's coming in. There'll be announcements related to that. We are working with the FDA, as I said, and then we are looking at some other assets. And I think, at the moment, the world needs to be going after addiction. I think we are well positioned to do that. We have the team to do it. We have the products to serve as a platform for it, and we are moving forward in that direction.
Thank you. The next question is, given the increase in alcoholism and opioid use disorder during the pandemic, what kind of government support is possible, both in terms of FDA or government grants?
Yeah, thank you. So, we are well connected into the National Institute of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse, and also into the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which are the two primary institutes at the NIH that are looking at this. We think there are grant opportunities. I will say that last year, pretty much the NIH had the vast majority of their funding that was unallocated redirected, partway through the year, kind of obviously into infectious disease. And that is now starting to thaw, and vaccine rolls out. as COVID recedes a bit, we're going to now be in the second pandemic. And that second pandemic is mental health disorders with addiction in the lead. And so I expect that you will now have additional funds coming, but NIDA had already been, increasing their funding. So I think there is help there, and we are looking into that. I shouldn't say looking into it, we're already working on it heavily.
Got it. Thank you. And the last question we have, I know you did speak about this earlier, but can you expand on the Parnovate acquisition and the opportunities this creates for Adial?
I'd say there's really two pieces there. And the first one is, we are very excited about the possibilities with the pain product. When you think about addiction, you think about pain. There's two ways to tackle addiction: is to treat those with it already and just prevent it in the first place. And so with a pain product like what we're looking at doing, I call that going after the supply side of addiction. Our mission is to help those people with addiction, and however we can, that's what we're doing. I think this is an exciting way to help, fight against addiction, and so we're excited about that. The other thing is adenosine products are well known, long hypothesized, and there's a number of them approved even for various disorders. That includes Parkinson's disease and cardiovascular problems, asthma, and we think that what we have is a technology that now allows us to go and do what nobody else has been able to do with adenosine. Describe that a little further. Previously, adenosine has been known to work on 4 receptors, and that's still today. And the problem you have is for any indication, you want to hit one of those receptors. And with compounds that have been developed, if you made it so it only hit one of the receptors and not the other ones, which is called selectivity, then you lost solubility. So the chemists were unable to get them to be selective and maintain the solubility. Because of that, you either had drugs with side effects, which meant they were non-selective but were soluble and could get into the body, or they were selective but you couldn't get them into the body, into the proper tissues. And Dr. Thompson has broken the code on that, in our opinion. And with that, it opens up all the promise that the adenosine drugs and people have been working on for 50 years. So let me continue on that. The last point is, with that, we will have some exploratory programs which we will not focus lots of funds on, but we believe we can develop some licensing opportunities with compounds targeted at various other diseases other than the addiction space.
Thank you. That's very exciting. There are no more further questions.
Okay. Well, since that's the end, I'll say we have our tablets. We're moving forward. We are going to take on addiction. And Brian, thank you very much for letting us present today.